Big recruiting news, obviously, with LSU shaking up their coaching staff. How has that affected them on the trail? We always turn to our favorites over at On3. We talked to Shay closing out last week. We talked to Billy Embody opening up this week. And Embody's got a bunch of news that you can read on over at On3. Of course, a part of the Bengal Tiger and a great podcast over there with the Bengal Tiger that you can find on Spotify, Apple, anywhere where you find this podcast. You can find the On3 podcast. So make sure and search those dudes up and give them a listen. It's good information on recruiting, but we love to plug in with them here on the show and get some information as well. It's good to see you, Billy. Good morning. Hope you had a good weekend.
Good morning, guys. Great weekend. How are you?
Doing good. We've talked about the coaching changes at LSU and who LSU has landed on. We did not talk to you about Corey and Raymond, so we'll get some thoughts there. But, Bill, now that the coaches are in place and it's an opportunity to get out on the road, we saw Frank Wilson and Joe Sloan up in Michigan on Friday. How has this new staff had an impact here early on representing LSU on the trail?
Yeah, I want to look at Bo Davis real quickly because he has come in and obviously he has had a little bit of a jump in terms of his time on staff over Corey Raymond and Jake Olson when it comes to being able to get out on the trail since he was hired earlier. But he went out and dished out 3 offers, 2 defensive linemen on, I believe it was Thursday, and then 1 on Friday. And then he hosted one of the best defensive linemen in the country just kind of on his own Saturday. So he has really made an impact right off the bat. This is that time of year where whether you're at a new job or whether you're at, your current job and you're moving on kind of to the next recruiting cycle and beyond, you want to get offers out. You want to get in front of prospects. I mean, that's a new rule this year that coaches, when they go on the road, can go see and talk with face-to-face 2025 prospects now that they're, roughly a year from their signing date. That's the new rule, is that coaches are allowed to meet face-to-face with prospects. And so LSU did that with Bryce Underwood. They did it with James Simon, the 4-star running back. They did it with Harlan Berry, the 5-star running back who's committed to LSU. They did it with Devin Harper, a 4-star offensive lineman. And Bo Davis, I would imagine, with some of these guys he's offered, was able to do that with them as well. And they were all, for the most part, top targets for him when he was at Texas. So he's starting to stack his board. And, LSU had offered, I want to say, 18 to 20 defensive linemen before Bo Davis got here, just true interior guys. Well, he's already up to 23 total offers out. Some of those guys won't be recruited. Some of them are off the board, things like that. But LSU now is getting its net cast on defensive linemen, which we know is a very important position, not only if LSU can scoop one up in the spring transfer portal window, but especially when it comes to the 2025 class and building off of what they finished with Dominic McKinley and Gabe Relaford. So Bo Davis is getting right to work. Corey Raymond, Jake Olson, Blake Baker, they're all starting to get their feet wet. We saw Blake Baker and Bo Davis with Dominic McKinley for an in-home visit. And, LSU brought in double-digit early enrollees, so some of those guys don't need to be visited. They're already in Baton Rouge, but you'll see them get out on the trail and see some of the guys that have signed and things like that as well. So the staff is hitting the ground running, and for the offensive staff, it's kind of business as usual for the most part.
Bill, more on Bo Davis. Davis's name has always popped up when the LSU defensive line job has been open. And for many LSU fans, some may remember him as a player. I mean, he finished playing at LSU in 1995 and 96. I mean, it's a long time ago. And then, his coaching at LSU, last time he was here, if I remember, was like 2005. So, it's been a minute since he's been here. And since he's been away, he has been a thorn in the side of LSU, whether it was his time at Alabama or his time at Texas. He spent time in the NFL with Detroit after some trouble he ran into at Bama that he took the bullet for the staff, really. Mm-hmm. Who is Bo Davis? What do they get in Davis?
Yeah, this is one of those positions that it is so hard to recruit year in, year out. And there are a few programs that just recruit defensive linemen very, very well each year, no matter kind of who the defensive line coach is. And then there are a few defensive line coaches that recruit the position very, very well, no matter where they are and develop. And defensive line is somewhat similar to offensive linemen, where you don't necessarily expect these true interior defensive tackles to make an impact as true freshmen. And so people can, say, like you look at Texas A&M, some of those highly touted guys that they've signed, it took them a minute to develop. And then this year they kind of broke out with one of the better, fronts in the SEC and around the country. But Bo Davis is one of the defensive line coaches nationally that year in, year out, you're going to get development. You're going to see some players take the next step. I mean, Louisiana native Barron Sorrell had a great season for Texas. You look at him, and he was a guy that, even myself is, just kind of following Louisiana recruiting. It was kind of like, okay, he ended up, ending up at Texas, good spot for him. We'll see if he develops. But it wasn't when he left the state as, LSU was recruiting him and things like that. And maybe Bo Davis takes a closer look at guys like that and sees a path for them to play and contribute on the field. So he is going to develop guys. That's a very, very big. And then he's going to have you in recruiting battles nationally that you want to be in. And I think looking at Texas's defensive line classes, they haven't necessarily had too many of the elite, 5-star defensive tackles that have signed with them. But what they have had is they've had guys with upside that are 4-star prospects, solid, and then they can be developed. And they've been able to sign multiple defensive tackles each cycle. And they've really just addressed the position and continue to bring guys in. And I think that's important for LSU fans to know. And LSU is one of the programs that will, usually recruit itself. I mean, people kind of complained about this 2024 class, and LSU sitting at number 3 in the rankings now, and another top 5 class for Brian Kelly. So, and he's upgraded the staff from a recruiting perspective without a doubt, especially with the new hires on defense. So, Bo Davis will bring you that notoriety. Right off the bat, like Zion Williams, yes. 4-star defensive tackle.
Give me both.
I know. Someone on the board said it when I posted it, and I fell into the trap this morning. 4-star defensive tackle from Lufkin, Texas. Zion Williams was on campus this weekend, and he was a guy that for the last few years, Bo Davis has been recruiting at Texas. The Longhorns lead the On3 RPM for him. They're going to be a big factor still in his recruitment, as is Texas A&M and TCU. But LSU just right away gets a visit as soon as Bo Davis is on campus. That's the type of stuff you want to see happening. You take these swings, you see what you can come up with. And year in, year out, I think LSU is going to be able to address the defensive tackle position especially well, with numbers and like coachable and projectable talent, because that's what Bo Davis has brought in. And he kind of does it quietly. He's not somebody that, is talking to the media and doing things like that from what we've gathered. He's just kind of locked in on his craft and recruiting. So should be exciting times on the defensive line for the first time in a while.
What did it mean to add Corey Raymond back to the staff?
Yeah, I think just watching, the Twitter reactions between former players and current recruits, I mean, a lot of people were very, very impressed that LSU got him back and were happy that they got him back, because similar to Bo Davis, you immediately have, and I think this is the key thing for me when talking about Corey Raymond, is he knows that there is a very, very high standard of what should be and who should be allowed to be recruited at LSU at defensive back. And that's not a slight at other people, but it's just a reality. There are certain guys and certain talents that can play in the SEC and play at a very, very high floor that gives you, even on off years, a solid secondary, and guys that can make plays and guys that can, be a part of good defenses. I mean, you just look at a lot of the guys that he's brought in. He's brought in some of the stars. He's coached up and developed different players over the last few years. And look, everything that kind of happened at the end of Ed Orgeron's era, I mean, it just kind of is what it is. It was a perfect storm of bad things happening, and I don't think you hold that against Corey Raymond. Now he went away for a couple years, and now you bring him back, and I think he's going to be re-energized to do this even better, quite frankly. And I think he's excited to be back at LSU and more motivated than ever, which I think is important too. He's got motivation to do this the right way and bring in talent. And, I think with a guy like Jabari Antoine, 4-star defensive back from Westgate in New Iberia, right where Corey's from, that was a guy that right away Corey Raymond made a big impact on being at LSU. I think he's somebody that was viewed as an LSU-Texas battle throughout the last year. And he's got a former teammate at Texas. He's got a former teammate now that'll be at LSU, and Demarion Johnson. And you're going to see, I think, LSU make waves in that recruitment, and that would be one of the first impacts that Corey Raymond would have. Like, honestly, I think there's a good chance that he goes to Texas if not for Corey Raymond being hired. Now we'll see what happens with the recruitment and how it plays out, but that's just my feeling, is that LSU has a much firmer stance in the recruitment now because Corey Raymond's involved, and that's the type of notoriety and credibility that he brings to the program, recruiting defensive backs on the national level and knowing Louisiana and knowing the national landscape. I think there's just a really high floor that's going to be expected. I think he's going to get back to recruiting some big corners for LSU. And if you can't play man coverage and you can't lock up a guy one-on-one, he'd rather pass and probably head to the portal because we've seen at various points over the last few years when you got guys who can't cover one-on-one, it can be pretty rough.
Bill, so the Alabama job opened up last Wednesday, not 2 weeks ago. And since then, we have just seen a flood of their roster go into the portal. As we sit here a week and a half after Saban is out and DeBoer is in, it is surprising to me that LSU hasn't capitalized on this roster more than they have. I mean, you haven't seen really anybody come over from Tuscaloosa. They miss out on a 4-star commitment, Jameer Grimsley, yesterday, who ends up pledging to Billy Napier in Florida. I don't want to ask this from a negative tone, but just what's going on there? Why is LSU not being able to have an impact here?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think there are kind of like different levels to it, right? Like Jameer Grimsley, who you're talking about, 4-star defensive back. He was recruited at Florida by Corey Raymond, and he's from Tampa, right about 2 hours from Gainesville. And so he was just really familiar with Florida. And, the thing with LSU is when DeAndre Robinson left Texas, 4-star defensive tackle, LSU was going to pick up the phone and call him, and Bo Davis was going to give it a shot. But at the end of the day, he's from Orlando. His girlfriend goes to Florida, and he ends up wanting to just go play close to home. And these things happen really quickly with the portal. And I think these two guys are just examples of where it just doesn't go LSU's way. And maybe if there's more time, maybe if, they're not just getting settled, or maybe if they had time to catch wind of it through other channels, maybe they have a shot to get him to visit and get him. But instead, these guys ended up at two places where they felt comfortable, and they were, okay with, going to college. When it comes to some of the other transfers from Alabama, I think there are some that would make sense. Like LSU kicked the tires on Trey Amos, who's, from the state. LSU recruited him last year before he ended up at Alabama, but Trey Amos, quite frankly, took less money to end up at Ole Miss from what we've heard, and he's just a guy that just doesn't want to go to LSU for whatever reason, and that's just kind of how the cookie crumbles, unfortunately. But there are some high-level guys like would LSU love to have been in on Caden Proctor and Caleb Downs? I'm sure. I mean, even Caden Proctor, when LSU has two great offensive linemen on the edges with Emory Jones and Will Campbell. I mean, you'd like to be in on some of these elite guys, but some of them already just know where they're going. I think Caden made a lot of sense for him to go back home to Iowa. I think Caleb Downs knew where he was going for the most part between Georgia and Ohio State, and ends up a Buckeye. And LSU didn't recruit him, as much. They weren't a factor, I should say, in his recruitment coming out of high school. So that's why you see so much of the time LSU, and look, now there's a whole defensive staff on top of this. So you'll see them recruit guys that you probably could tell they might not get, and coaches and programs across the country will do this. As long as the transfer portal is in play and one-time transfer rules don't apply, you're going to recruit kids that you probably feel like you're not going to get. And you're going to recruit them because you think they're a good player and they can fit your program, and you hope that they maybe hit the portal and you can capitalize the next time around. But there are also some Alabama players that have transferred that just don't necessarily make sense. LSU had a call with Desmond Ricks, and quite frankly, I think he had some other priorities in his transfer recruitment, and LSU said, all right, cool, we're good. We're going to move on. And if they find another way to address the corner position, they'll certainly do that, I feel like. But, some of these guys just don't necessarily make sense. I mean, Kendrick Blackshear, a highly touted guy, ends up going back to Texas. He's transferring to Texas, but he was a special teamer at Alabama for 3 years. He's got 1 year left. Shaz Preston ends up at Tulane. So, I mean, there's some guys that have left that program that already knew where they were going. And on the flip side of that, there are also some guys that probably can't help LSU in positions that they need. The positions that LSU needs, and especially the main one, is defensive tackles. Yeah. And we haven't seen Alabama lose too many guys that are difference makers out of that group. I mean, we've seen them hold on to the guys that do play for them on the defensive line, but Anquin Barnes and I think Monkel Goodwine are the only two that have left on the defensive line, and Isaiah Hastings, who ended up at Syracuse. Other than that, I mean, one of those three guys are guys who have performed. So LSU's searching for a defensive tackle or two, and Alabama just didn't. There was nobody that really left that were difference makers that could help in that respect. So they kicked the tires on Trey Amos, they kicked the tires on Des Ricks, and probably a couple others, but. There really wasn't. They've seen a ton of transfers, but they also they've had some high profile guys leave, but they've also seen a lot of guys that you would almost expect to leave, even if Saban was there leaving too.
Bill, you're on the front line of this stuff and talking to both the recruits and the transfer guys. At what point does the money come up? How fast is the money coming up in conversation now?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, there are, and it's, you can get down a complete rabbit hole with this stuff, but there are, programs across the country that have people that are working on it behind the scenes before they even hit the portal. I think it's pretty safe to say that just about every program, if you're going to be involved with a kid, would know kind of where all that stands as they hit the portal, just with today's day and age. And some prospects, it's a bigger priority, so it comes up quickly in conversations when you do hit the portal, and then they can actually talk about it. And then others, it not as big of a priority. Maybe they've made a lot of money at their previous stop. Maybe they have 1 year left and they know it's all right, this is my money year. I really either need to make money in NIL because I don't think I'm necessarily going to be an NFL guy, or I need to go somewhere where I can be developed and I just need the right situation for 1 or 2 years because I need to upgrade and feel like I can make the NFL and things like that. So there's a lot of different ways it gets talked about. There's a lot of different priorities when it comes to that. I don't always think it's a bidding war for players. Some of it is, but some of it it isn't. And some guys want to come back or go somewhere for the right situation. So I think a lot of the other avenues outside of the coaches discuss that and work that out with players, and then it's kind of can be bounced to the right channels to kind of be worked out. And also, you really don't want to overpay in the portal. That's a good way to be relatively poor in the portal pretty quickly is overpaying. So that's something that there's a line to walk there as well. It's very complicated.
Real quick, Bill, before we get you out of here, make sure you're following Billy on social media. He's easy to follow and find out there. He's a part of On3's coverage. He's on social at Billy Embody, and he had a good tweet go out just about 16 hours ago about a young quarterback over in Texas who picked up his first offer from Wisconsin, Colton Nussmeier, Lloyd and I were talking. First off, I didn't know Garrett had a younger brother, and second off, where is he at in his recruiting process, and is he on LSU's radar?
Had to change the game at Wisconsin.
Well, he is today's edition of Feeling Old, 2027 prospect. So we're a few years away from that. But actually, Garrett kind of gave us the heads up on Colton about probably a year and a half ago. It must have been at one of the summer camps. We were talking and just catching up. And he said, "Oh, my brother's coming up. He's about to start for Marcus this year, where Garrett started." I was actually at Garrett Nussmeier's first career start. He was a very tiny guy, threw a couple picks back then. But then I saw him as a junior's first start of the year, then as a senior's first start of the year, and obviously had an incredible senior year. But it's funny, I saw the picture of Colton, and I mean, wears number 13, just like Garrett did at Flower Mound Marcus. And so he looked just like him, just from a size perspective and everything. So, but all that being said, Colton is a very high level baseball prospect as well. So that is something that'll be interesting to follow as his recruitment goes along. But that was something Nuss told me, is that he's really, really good at baseball as well. So that'll be a factor potentially for him as he goes through the recruiting process. But he's got Murray State and he's got Wisconsin offers now. So he's squarely on the radar. I think the 2027 class, just looking ahead in Texas, is absolutely loaded at quarterback. I think if and there's a couple studs in Louisiana, Peyton Houston, Elijah Haven, and I'm probably forgetting someone, so someone in the comments can destroy me for that. But it's a really good class in 2027 at quarterback, and Colton Nussmeier is very squarely on the radar now. But his process is just getting going. He's on LSU's radar for sure. I'm sure Garrett is already working Joe Sloan to get him looked at and things like that. But, he's going to be a guy that's recruited on many levels, it seems like, throughout his high school career.
Does anything say more about a hot seat than $13 million in spending on a roster like Ohio State's Ryan Day does? Yeah,
I mean, wow. And kudos to him. I mean, they went after Caleb Downs, who I think Caleb Downs he was one of the best players in the country, like probably top 3 prospects I saw in person whenever he came out as a senior. And then I saw him at one of the All-American games. And then I just thought he was going to be an instant impact guy from day one. And he's going to be out of there in 2 years. He'll be out of Columbus and in the NFL draft as a top 10 pick, in my opinion. But sometimes that's what you got to do. They really want to beat Michigan. It makes a lot of sense. I think they were deficient in some areas, but they also haven't addressed some of the areas that they were deficient in. I mean, they still have a lot of questions at quarterback, regardless of bringing in Julian Sayin or not. And so, he's got a lot of pressure. Yeah, he's got a lot of pressure to fix this and get on the right side of at least beating Michigan. And we'll see what happens with Jim Harbaugh and the NFL hiring process. But yeah, it's kind of the same thing. And Lane Kiffin isn't on the hot seat because it's Ole Miss, but they're dumping a lot of money into it too and expecting results. And I think the big thing you're seeing it, Kirby Smart even tweeted about their collective right after Caleb Downs went to Ohio State. So now you're going to start to see some of these collectives really, I think, kind of turn up even more, which is crazy. But you get really good players, and then you can tout it and market it, and then people are like, okay, that's where I send my money. They got so-and-so. That's their guy. That's what I want to support. And some programs are slowly seeing that catch fire. And maybe Georgia, with Kirby Smart tweeting about it, will start to do that. And there's some other programs are already out there that have collectives that can tout bringing in highly touted guys, like an Ole Miss and now in Ohio State and others, and things like that. But it's just the latest example of an arms race. So yeah, Ryan Day has to win. I mean, he'll have a job somewhere because he is a good coach and can keep that in the right direction. But talk about bad luck for him. He just caught Michigan when they got over the hump with Jim Harbaugh and just built a really tough program that has been able to beat them up last few years, I guess, now in the big game.
Good to see you, Bill, as always. Great information. We appreciate it. Make sure you're following Billy Embody on social media and reading his work over at On3. Have a great week, Bill.
Thanks, guys.